Okay, so this is chapter 19. If you remember last night, they were at the bicentennial, and we know that Mr. Evans said something to Frida. Then they watched the fireworks. We're at chapter 19, Ghost Stories of Liberation of Gabriel King. Page 117. Ghost Stories. It was late by the time we got home. We were supposed to sleep outside in a tent and stay awake until the sun came out, but Frida didn't say a word the whole way back. I wasn't so keen on sleeping outdoors anymore, but the tent was already up and Pop had laid out our sleeping bags. Get all your stuff together before going out to the tent, Mama said. I don't want you kids running through the house all night. Don't forget your flashlights. And Gabe, make sure you use the bathroom this time. Mama gave me a look that said, well, remember last time? But I ignored her. Frida brushed her teeth like a robot, staring straight ahead. She spit out her toothpaste extra quick and went in the room to get her pajamas, then walked outdoors real solemn and zipped ourselves up in the tent. We sat on our sleeping bags, and I looked at Frida. No one was talking, so I cleared my throat the way I'd seen Pop do when things got strained. So I said at last, what did he say? Frida picked a string on her sleeping bag. Who? She asked. Mr. Evans, I practically yelled. What'd he whisper? Frida's face went blank, like she had no idea I was talking about. Oh, that, Frida said. I couldn't hear him on account of all the noise. Too bad, huh? That was a lie, and I knew it, but I nodded real slow. Yep, I said too bad. Frida lay down on top of her sleeping bag and took out her flashlight. Let's have a flashlight war, she said, and we pretended our light beams were swords and swished them all around. Frida won every time. Want to eat marshmallows, I asked? Frida nodded, and we pulled out a bag that Mom had given us to eat in the tent. We ate a whole bunch, and they were good, but the fun was missing. Want to tell ghost stories, I asked at last, to celebrate how brave we are? Truth was, I wasn't so crazy about ghost stories, but Frida loved them. Okay, I guess, Frida said. She reached up and tried to touch the top of her tent with her toes. Don't you want to, I asked? I want to, Frida said. She stuck one leg so high in the air it touched the top. Then she let it fall and swish onto her sleeping bag. She sat up and pulled her legs under. I'll go first, she said. Okay, I said. I was a little nervous. Frida seemed real serious. Want to hear a real one, she asked. I was sure I didn't, but I nodded anyway. Well, said Frida, it has to do with the number one thing on my list. Now I sat real straight. I turned my flashlight off, and only Frida's flashlight was shining in the middle of the tent. Then I pulled my legs in cross-legged and leaned my elbows on my knees. Tell me, I whispered. Frida leaned in forward. Every now and then she glanced at the zipped door of the tent, just to make sure no one was out there. Well, she said in a whisper, when me and Terrence were living in Alabama, and I was just a baby, Daddy and Mama were working with Martin Luther King to change laws that kept black people segregated. There were lots of white people who didn't like this, and one night some of them snuck onto our lawn. They were part of the Ku Klux Klan. My eyes popped. No. Yup, Frida said. Terrence told me about it. Usually he won't talk about it none, but this one time I asked him how come he's so angry at white people all the time, so he told me. He said it was an extra hot night, just like this one, and Mama was rocking me to sleep. Daddy was helping Terrence with his reading when they heard a sound like animals in the yard. So they went to see what it was. Daddy and Terrence were laughing about skunks, but when they opened the door, there was a ring of men all around our yard. They had on white sheets with pointed hats with only the eye holes cut out, and they lit a cross on fire right outside our front door. Terrence said it smelled like ash and he couldn't breathe staring at those ghosts. One of them started calling Daddy bad names. He yelled, "Come out and we'll let your family go," and Terrence said right then Daddy's face crumpled like paper burning in a flame. That's exactly how he described it. Frida's eyes were real serious. All the spit had dried from my mouth. What happened? Did he go out? I asked. But it was hardly a croak. Frida shook her head. Terrence said that's when Mama came flying down the stairs. She had me pressed to her chest, and she slammed that door shut and held on to Daddy real tight. Then she grabbed Terrence's arm so hard it hurt and dragged him to her bedroom. She made him climb into my clothes hamper, or her clothes hamper, even though he could barely fit in, and then she handed me in. Promise, she whispered to Terrence, that you won't come out until your daddy and I say it's all right. Promise you'll keep your sister silent. Promise, Mama said. She said it over and over again till he promised lots of times. Then she and Daddy were gone so long. Terrence thought they were dead, and the whole time he sat in that clothes hamper and prayed. He prayed, "Dear God, please keep Mama and Daddy safe." and he whispered in my ear like he was telling me a story, so I never made a sound. I could feel my eyes brimming up. Then what happened, I asked. They stayed a long time, Frida said. Then around 1 o'clock in the morning, the cross burned out and those ghosts left our yard. The next day, Daddy got all the pastors from different churches together, white and black, and they went to visit each of the people who dressed up in the white sheets. What did he do that for? I asked. How do you know who they were if they were wearing the sheets? What happened once they saw them? All my questions were running into one another. Frida held the flashlight tight. Daddy says everyone knows who's in the Ku Klux Klan. He says even though they keep themselves hidden, a man can't keep his views hidden in real life. And that's not hard to figure out who they really are. Wasn't he afraid, I asked? Yes, said Frida. But Daddy says he wanted everyone to know that he knew who they were. He said people will do things they wouldn't do otherwise if they think no one can see them. We know about that sometimes, like on the internet. They call them trolls, like that say horrible things to people because they feel like they're behind a screen. They can say things. After that, he figured the Ku Klux Klan would either kill him or leave him be. I guess that we were pretty lucky because they left him be. I could feel the sweat dripping down my neck, and it wasn't just because it was hot. We got the Ku Klux Klan around here, don't we, I asked, even though I mostly knew the answer, but I didn't want to believe it. Frida nodded. I know for sure we do, she said. How do you know? I asked, and Frida looked at me real steady. Because Mr. Evans told me so. He did, I croaked. Frida nodded. Want to know what he said? This time I nodded. He said if me and you weren't careful, the Klan might pay us a visit someday. I stood up so quick and my feet barely made it under me. I'm telling Pop, I said, but Frida's eyes went wide and she pulled him so hard on the sleeve and I fell right back down. Don't, she said. Your Pop will tell my daddy and I'll get in trouble, something fierce. Daddy told me I wasn't to ever go around men like Mr. Evans, and if he finds out, he'll be so mad. But what if they come after us? What if we're out here what if they're out there dressing up right now? Frida glanced at the door of the tent. They wouldn't, she said. But then she shivered. Then I shivered. Then I got thinking how we were all alone at night, just me and Frida. You hear something, I asked, and my voice got high and squeaky like it does when I get scared. No, said Frida real quick. Did you? No, I said, but just think of that moment. I did hear something. Sounded like a twig snapping outside the tent. I looked at Frida and I could tell from her face she heard it too. We sat real still. What was that? Frida whispered so soft I could barely hear. I don't know, I whispered back, but my mind sure thought I knew. I was picturing the whole line of white ghosts coming out of the woods. Maybe they were sneaking around the tent this very minute waiting to grab us. Frida grabbed my hand and she squeezed so tight I thought she might squeeze it straight off. What are we going to do? Frida asked, and I knew she was picturing exactly what I was picturing. She was asking me what to do. I think my mom and Pop would hear us if we screamed. Frida looked like she might cry. I don't know, she said, shaking her head. She squeezed my hand again, and this time I squeezed it back real tight. We're definitely at the climax of the story. They will, I said. I kept making up my mind. Mama hears everything, and Pop is a real good fighter. I promise I won't let go of you no matter what. Okay, Frida whispered on the count of 3. 1, 2, we screamed louder than we'd ever screamed before. We both stood up at once and started to run, only we forgot to unzip the tent. Since I promised I wouldn't let go of Frida's hand, we both had only one hand to work with, and we were sure couldn't get that zipper unzipped. The whole tent fell down on top of us, only it felt like maybe someone else pushed it down. We kept screaming and running and pulling that tent along with us, though we couldn't see which way we were headed. We were just one big bundle of tent and screaming people. Then 2 huge arms were coming down over us, and I thought they were goners until I heard Pop's voice shouting above all of our screaming. It took a long, long time, but Pop finally got that zipper undone, and me and Frida tumbled out. I still wasn't letting go of her hand, and she wasn't letting go of mine, and we were both talking at the same time, only neither of us had any breath left from all the screaming. I looked around, wondering how many Ku Klux Klan people there were, but the yard was empty. Pop was in his pajamas, and Mom was in her nightgown with her curlers in. They looked tired and wide awake all at the same time. What's wrong? Pop kept asking. What happened? Once I looked around and saw there weren't any Ku Klux Klan guys waiting, I thought Mom and Pop would be mad for sure. We'd woken them up and knocked down the tent, and all the neighbors' lights were on, but they didn't get mad. Pop was holding Frida by the shoulders, and Frida was holding my hand tight. Then she started choking out the whole story, even though she said she wasn't going to tell Pop. She told Pop all about the Ku Klux Klan and what happened to her daddy and about Mr. Evans and how we thought there might be Klan people outside the tent. And just like that, without a lick of warning, Pop's eyes overflowed. Never in my entire life had I seen Pop cry. But he grabbed Frida like she was his own child, and he held her tight and kissed the top of her head. He kept whispering, "Child, child," like there was nothing else to say. And the funny thing was, Frida didn't seem to mind. My best friend Frida, who was supposed to be the most liberated from all of her fears, let my Pop rock her back and forth like she was a little kid. That was the end of chapter 19.